All right. So I believe we're all set. Let me just introduce the closing activity. We are culminating a week of activities to celebrate our 40th anniversary. And to wrap up our General Assembly, we wanted to provide all members an activity which is a bit outside the box. All of us have been in a numerous numbers of webinars all year long, mostly with experts from our field, specialists, teachers, leaders. So for this closing activity, we wanted to hear maybe from a different field, and thought of inviting the OECD, of course, which is a internationally known hub for policy analysis, and with their series of publications on education at a glance, we thought it was a great fit to have some inspiring remarks, and we're very happy to have with us Deputy Secretary General. So let me first introduce our speaker and moderator. Ulrik Vestergaard Knudsen took up his duties as Deputy Secretary General in January 2019. His portfolio includes the strategic direction of OECD policy on science, technology, and innovation, employment, labor, social affairs, migration, and health, as well as entrepreneurship, SMEs, regions, and cities. He oversees the Center for Skills and the newly established Wellbeing, Inclusion, Sustainability, and Equal Opportunity Center, WISE. Jointly with the Secretary General, Mr. Knudsen transformed the OECD Executive Committee in special session into the Global Strategy Group to have a strategic forum to discuss issues of global relevance, which he chaired from 2013 to 2017. And to moderate the discussion, together with us, Dr. Joy Johnson, current president and vice-chancellor of Simon Fraser University. She also currently serves on our board of directors as vice president for IOHE Canada region. As SFU president, Joy is committed to enhancing student learning experiences, working towards Indigenous reconciliation, and advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion across the university. She previously served as SFU VP for Research and International from 2014 to 2020, where she led the fastest growth of any Canadian university in research income. Prior to Simon Fraser, Joy completed her PhD in nursing at the University of Alberta and joined UBC as professor. Her commitment to research led her to the role of scientific director with the Canadian Institute of Health Research and the Institute of Gender and Health. And she has also been appointed as Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. So Joy, the floor is yours for the moderation.
Well, thank you very much, David. It is a pleasure to be here at this important dialogue on the challenges and opportunities of higher education in the post-pandemic period. I want to begin by acknowledging that today I am speaking to you from the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples here in Vancouver, Canada. I'm pleased to be addressing the hundreds of participants from across the Americas and really pleased to be with the Deputy Secretary General. I want to begin by acknowledging the great work of the International American Organization for Higher Education. So thankful for the work that you've done to bring us together during these challenging times. Indeed, this global pandemic has upended lives, and I think we all recognize this, and it has caused enormous hardship. The pandemic has really accentuated social disparities and slowed progress, important progress, on issues such as climate change and reconciliation. But the pandemic offers an unprecedented opportunity, I think, as well, to reshape society and to build a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient future. It's interesting to consider how after the Great Depression and the Second World War, Western democracies were really able to reinforce the social safety nets through programs such as universal health care and unemployment insurance. And I believe that governments have an opportunity to redouble their efforts to confront issues like climate change, inequality, and racism. I think, in fact, citizens are demanding it at this time, certainly here in Canada. But first, we do need economic recovery, and this is what this post-secondary institutions, I think, are going to play a key role in. As we have seen in times of crisis and recession, the need for education and training will be great. Society is going to need to reskill and create new capacity for a displaced workforce. As leaders in advanced education, we all need to encourage our governments to invest in the development of human capital necessary for economic recovery. Governments also have an opportunity to fashion an economy that is less dependent on carbon. Demand for training in specific areas such as the technology sector, online learning, healthcare, sustainable energy, I think will increase. And post-secondary institutions like the one I'm from, Simon Fraser University, I think are uniquely adaptable. We know that our institutions can move quickly. Just think about the way in which we've moved our coursework online and adjusted our focus to deal with the crisis. Post-secondary institutions have also proven our ability to contribute to vital research and innovations. So as we transition out of the pandemic era, the resources that were harnessed to address the healthcare crisis, I believe, can be redirected towards addressing social inequalities and to rebuilding the low carbon industries and technologies that are going to be essential to achieving an environmentally and sustainable future. In addition to improving society's economic outlook, higher education plays a key role in connecting people across borders and fostering international cooperation. These are important themes to nurture as we face global challenges, not only a global health crisis, but challenges of climate change, inequality, and growing populism across the world. This is one of the reasons that I was honored to join the Inter-American Organization for Higher Education, IOHE, as the Regional Vice President for Canada. IOHE plays a critical role in promoting international collaboration across the Americas. With the recent rise in populism around the world, and with a number of challenges such as borders closing, an uncertain future, regional organizations such as IOHE and post-secondary institutions offer opportunities for international and cross-cultural collaboration. And I think these can help us to really develop better understanding and bridge divides in this challenging time. I do look forward to the opportunities that lie ahead for us. So when it's safe to travel again, I do believe that there's going to be pent-up demand for international exchange, for research and co-op, and indeed conferences as well. The pandemic has given us an opportunity to appreciate our interconnectedness, and it's offered a moment to reflect on what really matters to all of us. Post-secondary education has an opportunity to advance knowledge and expand opportunities, and I believe will help shape our future. So let's begin today's dialogue. I'm looking forward to engaging in a discussion with Ulrik Vestergaard Knudsen, and I'd like to turn the podium or the floor over to him. Ulrik Vestergaard Knudsen, as was mentioned, is the Deputy Secretary General, OECD, and he's going to provide some opening remarks. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and good evening here from Paris. It's 11:15. I think we're about 5 or 6 hours ahead of you. And first of all, a big congratulations with the organization's 40th anniversary. It's a real pleasure to be able to join you and discuss the challenges and opportunities of higher education in the post-pandemic world in the Americas. I'd like to say that I really share many of the things that you just said, Joy, about a crisis being actually an opportunity also to look at our societies. And at the OECD, we're talking a lot these days about how we can build back better. We have our Ministerial Council meeting next week. And actually, this will take place basically asking ourselves the question, how can our economies and societies recover in a way where we can come back stronger, greener, more resilient, more inclusive, and with new quality jobs? Many of the issues that you just also touched upon. It's about leveraging the digital transformation to make sure that we have productivity gains without creating more unemployment. It's about seeking ways to combat climate change. It's about perhaps also lessening geopolitical friction. And it's about making sure that we don't increase inequalities during this pandemic, but the opposite. So these are big questions, and I think education has a big role in all of this. But maybe we'll have a chance to discuss some of these larger issues also later in our conversation. Let me just now for 5 or 10 minutes zoom in on the education part of it, because all around the world, of course, higher education institutions have been significant in supporting governments, business, and the scientific community to find solutions to the challenges brought about by this pandemic. And certainly Latin America and the Caribbean are no exception to this. Many institutions throughout the region in Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Peru, Trinidad and Tobago are mobilizing scientific and medical resources to address the sanitary emergency. They're also contributing to ongoing research efforts and the production of much needed medical equipment such as respirators, masks and hand sanitizer. But the pandemic has also greatly affected higher education institutions throughout the subcontinent and around the world. From an abrupt shift to digital learning to funding cuts and lower student enrollment, institutions had to innovate solutions to continue with their activities without sacrificing their quality or access standards. Not an easy task. What's important to note is that these challenges have not affected all higher education institutions in the same way. Their capacity to adapt to the new normal, so if we even know what the new normal is yet, has varied depending on their operating model, their size, their activities, their ambitions in terms of going international, and also their connection with their local communities. So using a place-based lens and taking a regional perspective, we see that over the past 2 decades, millions of young people in Latin America became the first in their families actually to head to college, a historic expansion that promised to propel a generation into the professional class and frankly transform the region. But now, as the pandemic has gripped the continent, killing hundreds of thousands and devastating economies, an really alarming reversal is now underway. Millions of university students are leaving their studies. There are, of course, several contributing reasons for this. In Latin America, the pandemic has enlarged some of the existing inequality gaps that we both have already talked about. Despite recent progress in the expansion of the region's middle class, 40% of Latin Americans' population lives in vulnerable conditions with perhaps informal jobs or lower unstable income or without social protection. So also amid lockdowns, youth employment has spiked and many students cannot pay tuition, which even at public schools can cost anywhere from 1 to 8 times the monthly minimum wage, 1 to 8 times. Additionally, according to our OECD Latin America Economic Outlook from this year, enabling students access to follow online courses has been challenging for all countries, but in particular for the Latin American continent, where access to internet is strongly linked to household income and location. Most courses have moved online, but millions remain without access to the internet or even a reliable mobile phone connection. While responding to the urgencies of the crisis, governments and higher education institutions should take advantage of learning from and building on the experimentation that's being forced upon them, and to wisely and imaginatively embrace the possibilities it has exposed. In particular, one lesson that leaders in government and education should take away from the present crisis is that digital technologies in higher education open up vast new opportunities for innovation and collaboration. Consider, for example, the scope of collaboration that digitalization makes possible. Today, courses hosted by MOOC platforms reach millions of learners. Open educational resources can permit institutions to widely share learning resources, and learners themselves can be shared, if you like, across higher education institutions, combining their offerings to suit their learning needs. This ability to combine or pool learning resources at scale offer institutions the prospect of lower instructional costs and provides learners the possibility of more varied and up-to-date instruction in new areas of knowledge. However, the possibilities of digital technologies in education cannot be fully or even equitably realized without public authorities rethinking their role in funding and steering higher education systems in this new world that we're living in or about to live in. Today, in most higher education systems, an array of government policies hamper the full and effective use of digital technologies. For instance, examples such as legal provisions that prevent the development of open educational resources, or institutional funding methodologies and quality assurance rules that penalize higher education institutions for collaborating in the development and delivery of courses. Now is the time to really take note of the policies that are impeding innovation through digitalization, but also to rethink them and to reshape them. As you grapple with the serious problems of the moment, we at the OECD would like to invite you to engage with us and with your peers across the OECD. Together, the OECD hosts more than 20,000 higher education institutions, scores of national and subnational governments, and a multitude of creative educational companies and researchers. Their shared experience offers us our best prospect to build back smarter from this crisis. One exciting project that I'd like to share with you today is the new OECD project on innovation and entrepreneurship in higher education institutions in Latin America. The purpose of this project is to strengthen the capacity of higher education institutions to interact with their ecosystems in a post-pandemic world. The project will be carried out in cooperation with the Inter-American Development Bank and Santander Universidades. The project will select 10 higher education institutions across Latin American countries to assess their interactions with communities in this challenging COVID context, with a focus on entrepreneurship and digitalization. The final report will be launched in early 2022 at a high-level event in which I hope that members of this prestigious network will also be able to participate. So to end this these opening remarks where we began, I'd like to quote the economist Paul Romer, who famously said that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. The COVID-19 certainly is a very, very grave crisis, but it provides all of us with an opportunity, and I would even say an obligation, that should not be wasted, the chance to rethink and redesign Latin American higher education. We think at the OECD that we can provide governments with the evidence, with the independent analysis, and with the advice needed to respond to this crisis with policies that are evidence-based, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. And we stand ready to support you and your institutions in building back not only better, but also smarter. We cannot stand to lose a student generation to the COVID-19 crisis. We hold their future in our hands, and I hope that discussions like the one we're having today can help us achieve that goal.
Well, thank you very, very much, Ulrik. I think your comments are sobering. I think they really shine a spotlight on some of the extreme challenges we're facing, but offer a glimmer of hope as well in terms of thinking about the policy tools that we might have in place to move forward. I want to dig in a little bit and ask you to comment on, you talked about this reversal of students who were first-time generation attenders of university now not necessarily being able to attend university. And I'm just wondering, you know, what is the role of government in terms of policies? What should we be talking to our governments about in terms of policies to help these barriers, to address some of these barriers to attending university? I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh, but I think it's quite obvious that there is a role here for government to help in this deep crisis. There are several ways this could be done. One is that the governments could consider targeted support programs that could be either in the form of finance or logistics or even pedagogical support programs for learners who are at risk, but also for the institutions who serve these learners. It could also be vouchers that could be used to purchase maybe community-based internet access or even inexpensive notebook computers. I mean, it's easy to talk about going online or going digital, but if you don't have the internet access, if you don't have the computers, if you don't simply have the infrastructure, we can talk all we like about the digital solutions. So I think these are some of the types of support that governments should be thinking about. It could also be in the form of loan schemes, of course, for students.
Yeah, we certainly find in Canada that our loan schemes are not very attractive to low-income families because just that whole culture is really difficult. So thinking about how to also make this kind of programs appealing is something for us to be thinking about. I'm wondering, the other thing that's certainly happening in Canada is because so many people are unemployed or underemployed, there's a lot of discussion about skill development. And the ways in which the post-secondary system might play a role in assisting with that and helping our students be prepared to participate in a really disrupted job market. I'm just wondering if you have thoughts about the role of higher education, both in terms of reskilling, but also in terms of preparing our students for the future in this very difficult time.
Yes, I think especially in times where employment is under pressure, the higher education institutions also have an obligation to perhaps more directly prepare students for working life. That means perhaps taking a bit of a more holistic approach to learning, upgrading skills that are perhaps more readily usable in the labor market. It could also be promoting an entrepreneurial mindset. It's easy for us to say that we want students who are more ready-made for the labor market, but if there are no jobs out there, what's the use then? So I think it's a mix of making or readying the students through upskilling and through perhaps a more holistic, multidisciplinary approach to take on their first job, but maybe also for them to have more of an entrepreneurial mindset. This is not least true, I think, in some of the highly specialized disciplines such as IT or physics and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think too, so often we think about skills as being those kind of more hard skills, but certainly some of the critical thinking skills, the analytic skills are also going to be required. And I think sometimes the notion of skills is an anathema to the post-secondary university system, but I certainly see that there is an opportunity for us to be playing a role and to really step up. So I really appreciate your response. And it's like we have to find ways to have a meaningful discussion about this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm wondering, you've talked about the financial impacts of the crisis on higher education, certainly how those impacts are being differentially felt across the sector and across countries, obviously, importantly. Again, thinking about government, I'm wondering, this is certainly something that's top of mind for me here in Canada, as we, to think about what is, again, the role of government in terms of helping to ensure that our post-secondary institutions, our universities are going to remain healthy and be able to play this vital role. Do you have thoughts about the role that government should be playing?
Yes, and I have to say that this is perhaps one of the worrying aspects of this crisis, because as governments come out of the crisis, maybe next year, maybe the year after, there will be so many competing pressures for government funds. First of all, there'll be a big bill. There'll be loans that we have to pay back. I don't think we have seen ever in the history of mankind these kinds of fiscal packages. And even though we live in a low interest environment, some would say even in a zero interest environment, these loans would have to be paid back. And there will be immediate attention, of course, on unemployment schemes, on upgrading the medical sector. There will be talk about the preparedness. On top of that, we have what you said rightly in the beginning. We have a climate change to combat. That is not free either. That is costly. We don't believe it when politicians tell us that we can combat climate change without any cost. So there is a risk that expenditure or fiscal programs for education will come after all of these pressures. I just mentioned three of the big ones. Mm-hmm. And of course, that is a big worry because that would be short-sighted. I think we can all on this call agree that investing in education, be it primary, secondary, or tertiary education, really is an investment in the future. And it would be very, very short-sighted to finance the other pressures I was mentioning through cutting down on education. And if our institutions then are also faced with declining enrollment figures because of borders only being slowly reopened, and even perhaps after borders are reopened, there will be a reluctance among the young to travel too far for education. Maybe combined with the climate crisis, there'll be a new approach to travel. So I think there are some worrying trends here that could form a vicious circle, if you like. I think we need to be aware of that, and I think we need to make the case with governments, but also with foundations and multilateral organizations like the OECD, that there are great risks involved in underfunding education in the future.
You know, it's interesting because I guess the other side of that is that there is a synergy across these issues as well, that as we think about, for example, the post-secondary system, we certainly have a role to play in terms of innovation and the green economy. We certainly have a role to play in terms of helping prepare workers and people who can be productive. And I agree with you. I think it would be really short-sighted to not think about the role of the post-secondary system in recovery. The other thing that's really become very apparent to me, at least, is that we are an important driver of the economy, just in terms of the people we employ. And the other industries that rely on us, from the restaurants and but the other, multiple industries in many of our towns and cities. Universities are major employers, and so that there's also those ripple effects. And I'm not sure that we've spent the time that we need to be thinking also about the entire ecosystem and the ways in which all these pieces might be able to fit together in a bigger way.
No, I think you're right about that. And as we talk about the digital transformation and education institutions, we sometimes tend to think narrowly about it as going online and online courses and so on. But I think also we need to think about the role of a digital transformation of institutions in terms of upskilling the rest of society. I think higher education institutions have a responsibility here, perhaps to lead the way or stay or get ahead of the curve in terms of making sure that these ripple effects of digital transformation reach the wider ecosystem that you just talked about. I think that is important. It's a little bit abstract, but it's definitely an area I think that we should have a closer look at.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for us here at Simon Fraser University, part of our vision is to be a university that's engaged with our communities. And I think that universities play an important role in our communities, in our ecosystems. And I think at this time, it's really important for universities to be thinking about what their responsibilities are, certainly to continue to educate, certainly to continue to do research that you spoke about, that innovation, but also to really partner in bigger ways and to be working. We are anchors in our communities, and to be working with our communities to help them think about opportunities for recovery. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, if you know, or if the OECD is really thinking about what roles institutions can play and how we can leverage this opportunity as we move forward.
No, I think that's right. I think you have to think innovatively. I think higher education institutions could play the role as facilitators, as accelerators, incubators, or these competence centers. There are plenty of opportunities here. We've also at the OECD done several reports in countries about the cooperation and relationship between higher education institutions and SMEs, also to facilitate that kind of network to the benefit of both universities and SMEs. Perhaps not always the first nexus you would think about. So I think it's about using innovation, expanding the network, strengthening it, and making the best possible use of the networks you have.
Yeah. There's a question that came into the chat. I think it's really interesting because you talked a little bit about the technology that's going to be required. You know, the access to to the internet in order to engage in this kind of new forms of learning that we're all talking about. But we're also realizing that not all of our learners have the competence to actually, there's the question of the hardware, but there's also the question of the competence to actually utilize these technologies in a bigger way and to utilize them for education. And I think this is a whole other challenge that we need to be thinking about. It's not just about getting the wires in the right places. It's also about thinking about how to use this technology, as you said, in an innovative way.
Yeah, and I think that this challenge is a mirror of a greater societal challenge. I'd say definitely that if there's one positive thing that's come out of the COVID-19 crisis, then it is that the digital transformation has had what I would call perhaps a popular breakthrough. In many countries, at least, we've learned to telework. We've learned to use telemedicine. It's been in many ways the only thing that's kept us communicating with friends and loved ones and so on. And the new digital technologies will also help us perhaps even find the cure and disseminate vaccines and so on. So that's all good. And some people say that we've taken a 5-year leap in terms of digital transformation in just 5 months. That's all very well, but there is also some risks here because there was already a digital divide 5 months ago. There was a big risk that this digital divide will increase even more. So it means first of all you have to have the internet access. That's number one. But then secondly, you also have to have the infrastructure. You have to have access to a computer also. And then thirdly, and this is maybe where you have a big role. We also need digital skills, digital reskilling, digital upskilling all the time. So even if you have the access and you have the infrastructure, that's not necessarily enough for you to go digital. So we will have to have even more focus on that because it's a precondition for the digital transformation to succeed also in your sector, but it's certainly also a precondition for not increasing both the digital and the economic divide.
Ulrik, I'm very conscious of the fact it's the 40th anniversary of IOHE. It's I think, plays an important role. I wonder if you have any thoughts for those who are watching, those who are part of this organization, about the role that organizations like IOHE can play as we start to think about recovery and really shaping our future.
Well, actually, when I was preparing for this conversation and this meeting, it struck me that as I learned about the organization, that much of what I love about the OECD is actually also what is so admirable about what you do. It's you facilitate cooperation, you enhance cooperation, you have a space where you can share best practices and share solutions on how you've tackled various challenges. And actually, that is also very much what the OECD is about. not only in the education sector, but across so many fields of society. So I think you're doing a great job, and there seems to be no midlife crisis at 40. So congratulations on that. The OECD also welcomes if the countries represented here would engage with us even more. We would like to hear about your expertise and your experience. I have two projects that I would just like to promote now that we talk about that. One is our higher education resources project, where we look at improving institutional funding systems to better support cross-institution collaboration. And the other one is a brand new project called the Digitalization of Higher Education, where we explore what governments can do or must do to ensure that higher education systems maximize the potential of digital resources, much of what we've talked about here, while still providing the protections and the quality that students deserve. So I think those could be two interesting projects for us to cooperate on.
That's fantastic, and we'll make sure that people get the the links and information about those projects. I think they're so well aligned with the work that we have ahead of us, certainly. So I really want to thank you for that, Ulrik, as well. Maybe in our last, 4 minutes or so, I'd like to just turn to the future. I think we're all, certainly at my university, I don't think any of us think that we will, quote, return to normal to the way it was. Partly because we've learned so many things about how we can innovate and do things different, and you've alluded to that. But I'm wondering if you pull your kind of crystal ball out here and talk a little bit about where you see the future going for education. I think we all are trying to think about where we need to get to. You've talked a little bit about that, but I'm just wondering if you'd like to expand on that.
I think, as in any sector, as in any workplace or company, we've learned something about ourselves during this crisis, the lockdown, and I think we all agree that we can't do much longer without the person-to-person contact, without meeting in real life, without the interaction, and I think this is perhaps more true for the education sector than any other sector. This is where ideas are created when people meet, and especially great ideas, academic ideas, thinking about the future. If there's one sector that cannot do without that, it is the higher education institutions sector. But at the same time, we've also learned that there are things that we can actually do without meeting, and perhaps even do with more concentration and focus. So as any company, I think also the higher education institutions will have to find that perfect hybrid model in the future, where we maintain the best of the meeting of minds and the meeting of people, with a future that will be more based on digital solutions and digital learning. I don't have the right formula, but I think that the future will be. I think the successful universities in the future will combine the best of what we had before the crisis, but also some of the learnings from this crisis. Also, because there will be change upon us anyway. I think there will be less travel in the future. That also means that universities have to change their value proposition. They will have to have a hard think about that. They will have to cut costs, perhaps, and maybe the digital side of things is part of that answer. I think for students to travel from one country to another, they would still have to have this social interaction and professional interaction with professors, with like-minded students, with students from other cultures, and so on. So that has to be, of course, a big part of it, combined with the best and most model digital technologies, which will, by the way, also perhaps better prepare them for the labor market to end where we started.
Well, thank you ever so much, Ulrik. You've done such a great job of highlighting some of the challenges, really putting a pin in some of the the disparities that exist and are growing. But you've also given us a call to action, I think, as a post-secondary sector, to think about what our role is. And I really like the parallel between IOHE and the OECD. I think we do have a lot to learn from the way you work. And it's really so helpful for us to have someone outside our sector come and talk to us. So I really want to thank you for engaging with me today. And I'm going to pass it back to David Julian.
It was my pleasure. Good luck and congratulations again.
Thank you so much, Ulrik. And we know it's late down there in Paris, so an extra special thank you for that. Enjoy. I mean, you've been president since 1st of September, but I know this morning was your installation, so congratulations as well. And I know it's Convocation Week, so we really appreciate the time and having you to lead the Canadian region. So these were very interesting remarks, inspiring remarks, especially now that we're wrapping up this year of celebration, but we definitely need, and that was discussed during the assembly, we need to start reflecting on what's next. So we'll definitely channel that in. Ulrik, you'll hear from us just to get more details about that we'll share with our membership and make sure we can work on something together. So to all of you who have been connected since the beginning of the assembly and to all our activities this week, it's been an immense pleasure to be with you. We felt the warmth of the region coming all the way up here. So normally we would transition to our gala. So take your bottle of champagne and pop it up on our behalf to celebrate. So merci à tout le monde. See you soon, and we'll be in touch.